Where are you?
Somerset. It
Can
was
somebody tell me, is he a bronze Adonis, Suzanne?
No comment, John.
I think more drowned, I would say, John. Actually, it was very, very wet.
Wet,
very
wet.
wet.
Drank a lot. This is not very good in terms of our wealth, our health indicator dashboard today. You know.
No, that's true.
Yeah, I heard it was very wet, and it was very cold in Rome for the Pope, of course.
Yeah, very, very wet and cold. Yeah, everywhere. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Nah, well, that's life, isn't it? So let's just have a quick check. People are flooding in at the moment, aren't they, Susanna? We've got. We'll give them another minute or so, shall we? Even though I know that we want to start on time if we possibly can, but let's see how we go.
Yep, I know of a couple of people who are joining a bit late, so.
Okay. Well, we've got 28 at the moment, 29. See if we get to 30. We'll use that as a marker.
Well, it's not really on the agenda, but I think people might just be interested to hear from Ed or from Nick Hume if he's with us, how things are going in the hospitals given the strikes.
I'm sure that Ed, you may pass a comment on that when we come to you on the agenda item, if you like, Ed. If you know, it's not on the agenda. I'm not sure we're going to get Nick. Have we got Nick yet? I don't see him there.
I think Nick's at his sister's birthday party in Spain. But I'm happy to pick that up on the agenda later on.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great. Well, we've got 32 now, so let's kick off so that we don't get too late. So, welcome to everybody. Lovely to see you all. You've already heard the discussion about the weather and holidays and so on. It is actually a funny time, isn't it? This post-Easter week for holidays. So thank you to all for making it today. Really appreciate it. And particularly, as John has just touched on, actually, and Ed will mention more about recognising the pressures on the system, on all players in the system at the moment with the junior doctor strike. So thank you very, very much for your time. Also, we need to recognise that this meeting is taking place during PERDA. We've been assured that the agenda is perfectly compliant, but we ought to note that we are in a PERDA period in case that becomes relevant during any discussion. But actually, the big focus for today, of course, as you will have seen from the agenda, is on the biggest focus amongst many important agenda items. The biggest focus is on mental health, which we'll get to after the break. So looking forward to that. I'm just going to say a general welcome, if I may, to all new members and deputies rather than going around the table. And if it's acceptable to everybody, we'll record apologies, deputies and indeed new members in the agenda, in the minutes, in the normal way. So with that, with your agreement, I'll go straight to declarations of interest. So are there any declarations of interest or potential conflict of interest with any agenda item other than those of which we're aware and which, of course, you can see in the ICP workbook, which is on the agenda for the next item. So no hands raised, nobody waving. We'll take it that no declarations of interest with any agenda items today. Thank you very much for that. So we'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting, 10th of March, and we'll consider them first for accuracy, please. There are only 5 pages. I'm tempted to take them all on block. I do have one point myself. It's actually on the top of page 1, where there's a typo recording Andrew Reid as chair. In actual fact, it was John Spence was the chair of that meeting. So if we could make that change in the minutes to go on record, that would be good.
I'd noticed that. Well, I just thought it was a reflection of my lack of personality.
John, you're forgiven for for that. Thanks for also spotting it. Any other items for accuracy, please? And again, no hands raised. Oh, one hand from Nikki O'Shaughnessy. Nikki?
Good morning. I've just put it in the chat, but it was to say it was an in-person meeting at first sight. It wasn't online. Again, just at the top, Will. It says online. Thank you.
Nikki, good spot. And I missed that as well. You're absolutely right. So we'll change online to in-person at first sight. Yep. Great. Thanks, Nikki. Any other points of accuracy? Otherwise, agreed with those two amendments. Thank you very much. Let's then turn to the workbook, which contains the action log and the matters arising. Now, as far as I could tell, with the exception of one item, which I'll come to, all the items were either complete, not yet due, or on the agenda. But there is one of which I think an update would be useful. And Susanna, perhaps I could come to you for that VCFSC assembly update, please.
So this is just to say that there's a lot of work going on at the moment, particularly around the Resilience Charter, with a number of task of finish groups taking place and a number of people engaged in that. There'll be a full update for the ICP at the meeting in June. So it'll move on the action log to June, but quite a substantial piece on that agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. And then before I go to the three specific matters arising, which are noted on the agenda, let me just deal with the workbook as a whole. Is everybody content with the workbook from a point of view of accuracy? Pam, over to you.
Sorry, I interrupted at the wrong point. It's just that I'm struggling to raise my hand or to use the chat. So I wonder if there's anything that can be done at your end to enable the chat for outside users.
Actually, if we could minimise the use of the chat, I know that some would that would be appreciated by those who cannot access the chat. So I'm not sure, Pam, whether it's been actually disabled or whether it's just not working very well with a Friday morning Teams meeting. But if we could make the most of the discussion by raising hands, I know that others would appreciate it. So that would be great.
So, William, whilst I've got your ear, just to let you know, sadly I have to leave at 11:30, which I was going to put in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Pam. That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Okay, so back to the workbook. Any other issues or points to raise from the workbook? Otherwise, it's only to receive, so we'll take it as received and noted. I'll then go to the specific matters arising on the agenda. There are three items. Susanna, over to you.
Okay, so this is just to provide an update to members of the ICP on these three issues, all of which are important. So the first is an update for you all on the Leading for System Change in Suffolk and North East Essex programme, which we've framed as Break the Mould. We have got 46 participants for the programme, and you'll see a little breakdown at the bottom of this slide of where they've come from. And also you'll see that there are a number of those participants who are from a clinical background, which is really good to see, because that was a particular objective that we had for the programme. In the version of this update that you have in your papers, it did say that the programme is going to launch early this week at the Integrated Care Academy. We took the decision, in light of the junior doctors' strike and the number of clinical participants that we have in the programme, to delay the start. So the programme now will start on the 22nd of May. And in discussion with the faculty delivering it, we are going to use the LiveWell domains to organise the topics that they're going to follow through. But we're going to very much go with a kind of lived experience perspective to frame the detail of those topics. So we'll keep updating you as this moves forward, particularly because once the programme begins, one of the features of the programme is that the faculty would very much appreciate a number of senior sponsors around the system once you hear about the specific projects that the participants are going to take forward. So we'll give you an update in the future, but it is a little bit delayed. Do you want me to pause there? Because I know that Nikki's got her hand up, Will.
Yeah, good idea, Susanna. Nikki, do come in.
Thank you. Could I just confirm that Essex County Council have got 3 members of staff on the programme, one from Public Health, one from Children and Families, and one from Adult Social Care?
Oh, I'll take that away, Nikki, because I haven't got the list to hand, but I'll just double check that. It might be that on my slide I've got them the wrong way round, possibly. But thank you for that. I'll double check, because I do remember that the nominees coming in from Essex, so it might be that my slide's wrong. Thank you for that. Okay.
Thanks, Nikki. Back to you, Susanna.
Okay, so then the next update is on the Task and Finish group for the Community Ambition Programme. We had a really comprehensive update on this at the meeting at First Sight last month in March, and Councillor Spence very much underlined the importance of getting moving on the Task and Finish group for this. Edward Creasy, who is the chair of our Ipswich and East Suffolk Alliance, has very kindly taken on the role of chairing this Task and Finish group. It's meeting on Monday for the first time. It's only going to actually meet twice. We're very clear about what the task is, and those meetings are this Monday and then deliberately a few weeks later to allow the work in between to take place. And there will be an update as requested or as agreed at the meeting in June. So that's that. If there is anybody who hasn't had the invitation to that Task and Finish group and from the ICP who wants to participate, then just drop me a line and I can add you to it. Thank you.
Okay, and I don't see any hands raised, Susanna, so I think you can keep going.
And then the final one is that I'm not sure that anybody could have missed this because it seems to be everywhere, but just to update members of the ICP that the Hewitt review has now been concluded and the final report is available on the DHSC website. There are also a number of sort of summaries. It's quite long. It's about 89 pages long if anyone's read it. But there are, if you haven't got time to wade through 89 pages, there are a number of summaries, and I've got a couple of those available if anyone would appreciate one. That is now kind of quite an important step forward in terms of that piece of work.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, it just came out just before the Easter break itself, didn't it? But so you've got some summaries, Susanna. I know there are summaries all over the shop written by different organisations and maybe from their different perspectives and so on. But are you saying if anybody wants a summary or summaries, drop you a note? Yeah,
drop me a line, because I mean, to be honest, some of them are written from different perspectives, if I'm honest. But there's a number around. Thank you. No,
that's fair comment. Yeah. Okay. So any questions for Susanna on matters arising? Otherwise, we'll say noted. Thanks, Susanna. Moving on then, the ICB update. I'm going to go to Ed, and Ed, you kindly volunteered also to give a junior doctor's industrial action update. So over to you.
Thank you. Industrial action was part of the discussion we had on the 21st of March. So I'll just give a bit of an update there. I'll also ask, if possible, for Nicola Cottington to add her views, because Nicola runs operationally the West Suffolk Foundation Trust, so she'll have an even better perspective than mine. But I guess that the headline message is this is extremely difficult. It's damaging for patients and staff morale, and there doesn't seem to be an end to it at the moment. So, as you'll have read from the press, there isn't a meaningful negotiation with the BMA, I don't think, at the moment. And then we're also reading that the offer to the nurses potentially is going to be rejected as well. So this feels like an issue that's going to roll for some time, regrettably. Having said all that, the preparations and the collaboration in the system has been superb, and I thank owe a debt of thanks to everyone involved. We prepared very well prior to Easter, and we've had good flow within the hospitals, which has been excellent. And I think all week as a system we've been on Opal 2, Opal 1 level, which is sort of the lowest level of risk. So we've managed the urgent care system very well, I believe. However, there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of appointments and operations that have been cancelled, and that's very damaging and adds to the waiting list we've got. So it's kind of a mixed picture there. But Nicola, what are your thoughts and perspectives from working very closely with the clinicians and the staff?
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Chair. You've covered a lot of it, Ed. I think the most significant impact is on the patients waiting for their planned appointments and surgeries. As you said, that is hundreds, if not thousands, of patients across our area who are impacted, many of whom have already waited a very long time. So we've been working really hard to get those longest waits down and have been successful in doing that. And this just extends some of those waits, which is really distressing. It's distressing for the patients, and it's distressing for the clinicians who want to treat those patients, who want to operate on them. So that's really difficult. It's really difficult. And of course, there's a cumulative effect if there are future episodes of industrial action as well. So that builds. And I think there is a serious impact on our ability to therefore meet the challenges of the operational planning guidance to recover elective activities we'd want to, and we flagged that in our response to that. From a staff point of view, staff have been fantastic. So we've supported, and this, we're working really closely with ESNEF. So I don't think I'm just talking on behalf of West Suffolk. We have regular calls 4 times a day actually with system partners, including ESNEF, primary care, etc. And staff have very willingly and very graciously stepped up. We've had people who have voluntarily cancelled their annual leave during, Easter time, where many people would want to spend time with their families, and people have just voluntarily come in. We haven't asked anybody to do that, but they have come in to cover, particularly our more senior doctors, but also senior nurses, pharmacists, etc. So in terms of an emergency care point of view, as Ed said, we've managed to maintain patient safety and have had really effective flow. That's really due to the planning that happened last week and the weeks before and over the weekend. And we came through the Easter weekend in a really, good state compared to previous bank holidays. So that's put us in a good position. But I wouldn't want that to give people a false sense of security. So departments haven't been quiet. So I know nationally there's been reports that emergency departments have been quieter. We've seen still high levels of ambulance conveyances, but actually the ambulance service have also reflected that because we're able to offload ambulances in a timely way, that's been good for them as well. So there are some positives, but that masks that harm that is happening to people who are waiting for their planned interventions.
Thank you, Nicola.
Back to you, Ed. Thanks, Nicola. Or do you want to take a moment, Ed, to see if there are any specific questions on that particular update before you go to the rest of your... Yeah, OK. Let's just give people a moment if there are any hands raised. I don't see any. So shall we say thank you to both of you for that specific update, and then back to you, Ed, for the rest of the board update.
Yeah. So the 3 other things I'd pick out from the board is every board meeting we have an update, a case study really from each alliance, and it was West Suffolk Alliance's turn at the last board. And what they showcased was the work that's taking place between West Suffolk Council, Abbeycroft Leisure as the leisure provider, and the NHS. And there's some superb preventative work that's taking place with that leisure trust, and we thought about how that could be extended, built upon within the system. So we were very grateful to colleagues for that presentation. Secondly, we noted some really positive progress around cancer. So compared with where we were in the pandemic, we are doing 24% more first treatments in terms of cancer, which is a huge amount, compared to a 6% increase nationally. So that is very positive. And also in our 62-day cancer performance, which is the key metric that's looked at, we're around 10% above the national average at present. So thank you to everyone involved with that effort. And then finally, this is a time of year where the NHS focus a lot on operational and financial planning. The dominant issue at the moment is the finances of the health service, and across the country now, ICB or systems collectively are pointing towards around a £3 billion financial deficit. In SNE, we have submitted a balanced financial plan, and we're one of the only systems in the country to have done that, which is very positive. But at the same time, it means that we've had to really tighten our belts in many regards, and a lot of flexibility we might have had in previous years we're not able to enjoy. So very pleased that we've got a balanced plan, but it is a very difficult context that we're in, as money that the health service received during the pandemic has now been effectively withdrawn, and we're having to cope without it, even though we still are coping with COVID, if that makes sense. So thank you, Will. Those are the 3 or 4 key things that came out of the board last time.
Yeah, thank you very, very, very much, Ed. And that was a great summary of a lengthy meeting, the 400-odd page pack, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for that synopsis. John, did I see your hand come up there?
You did indeed, Will, and well done, Ed. I mean, I, from a local government viewpoint, I find it extraordinary that systems are able to submit deficit budgets at all, really. And then there never seems any consequence if they fail to hit the budget anyway. I am aware, Ed, that in other parts of our county there are substantial deficits for the current financial year. Am I right in thinking that you've not only submitted a balanced budget for next year, but you're coming in pretty well online for 22-23?
Yeah, we've met our financial commitment for the past year, and plan to do so for next year.
Well done.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Ed. Let me see, Ed, if there are any more hands raised, but I don't see any. So shall we take that update as received and noted, with grateful thanks, as Ed has, and Nicola as well articulated, to all for the efforts and contributions that have got us to the position we're in at the moment, although I know that none of us want in any way to be complacent, to be either to be seen to be thought to be, or need to be complacent. So there's a lot of pressure on the system and system players, and thanks to all for keeping that focus as it is. In which case, shall we then move on to the next item, which is progress on the integrated care strategy, and particularly measurement of delivery, which is relevant very much to the discussions we've had already this morning. Susanna, over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. Colleagues will be aware that we've previously approved an initial version of our integrated care strategy. We've produced that strategy as an online resource, and it was always the case that we would continue to evolve and develop the strategy as we move forward. One of the really key areas of the strategy is measurement. We agreed that we would integrate measures throughout the strategy. And indeed, for the very first version that was produced, there were a number of indicators and numbers and so on included in that. But we've been doing some work, and particular thanks to colleagues in the Suffolk public health team, to Anna Crisp and her colleagues as well, for their help with this, because I've had the benefit of their huge expertise in terms of their support around this piece of work. But we've been doing some work about how do we move forward the use of measurement around our integrated care strategy. Now, one of the things to remember is that the focus for the integrated care strategy is on population health. It's about looking at, what we do collectively as a health and care system and how that impacts on the overall population health outcomes for people in Suffolk and North East Essex. Other plans, so things like the Joint Forward Plan that Richard is leading the work on for the NHS at the moment, are slightly different in terms of the fact that they will focus on specifically the benefits that the NHS will deliver to the population. So the paper that we've circulated to you was very much a joint effort. And we're actually seeking your approval this morning on 3 specific things. So these are the 3 areas that we're looking for your approval this morning. We're going to just talk you through very briefly. The first is to approve the adoption of a very simple measures framework based on our outcome-based approach. The second is, I'm going to talk you through that, and then my colleague Liesl Kennedy is just going to demonstrate to you the incorporation now of some dashboards containing some population measures to each of the main sections of the strategy. And then last but not least, working together with the public health teams, we have a suite of proposed barometer measures that relate to each of the subsections of the strategy as well. So just to begin in terms of the measures framework and why that's necessary, most colleagues will have seen before the outline that we've given around outcome-based accountability and the way that we've thought about that in the system. And one of the very key principles in outcome-based accountability is to make sure that we're clear about the difference between an outcome measure, a measure around kind of the well-being of a whole population, and a performance measure, which is a measure of the delivery by a particular service or a particular kind of programme. And the reason why this is really important is that we think that, you know, they're very different things. But as we've been working this through, we've realised that actually sometimes we've got a bit of a missing link. So Anna Crisp, as we were working this through, who's a very clever lady, she mentioned to me her favourite example of where we have a missing link. So she said that in terms of kind of performance, she said that Suffolk has one of the highest rates of schools with a good or outstanding rating from Ofsted, and yet in terms of academic attainment, if you like, that performance, if you like, that outcome doesn't necessarily measure. So the missing link is kind of, you know, what is it that performance is delivering, and is it the right thing to deliver the outcome that we want for the population? So at its very simplest, the outcome measures framework they're proposing is just to actually think about measures in 3 different ways. So the first is about performance delivered by specific services, and of course those deliver to the people who use those specific services. The second is measuring our kind of the collective benefits that we deliver to the population through health and care. And the third is about improving outcomes for people. And of course, outcomes can be influenced by many, many wider factors. So the example I've given at the bottom of this slide is one, for example, around premature mortality under 75s from cancer. Now, many people know that I lived in Tendring for a very long time. And one of the things that always struck me was looking at premature mortality rates for cancer for people living under 75. Think about the people I knew around me in the community. So if you work back from that measure on the right, the kind of benefits that we want to deliver to the population is, you know, things like, if we're going to get that figure down, we think about, well, we want to have benefits like access to healthy lifestyles, being able to avoid environmental risks, having regular screening, being, you know, your cancers being diagnosed early, being treated early, that treatment being effective and successful, and everyone working well together in terms of delivering those services. Those things, though, those benefits, those measurable benefits, for example, you know, early diagnosis of cancer would be driven, though, by the separate different performance of lots of different things. So perhaps the uptake of different healthy living programmes, or whether or not you can access an appointment in primary care if you've got a concern, your access to, and also people's uptake of screening, timely access, how long you have to wait for treatment, the clinical quality of the service you receive, and how effectively local services collaborate as well. Those are all different kind of things around performance. So this idea around performance driving benefits which drive outcomes is fairly simple. There is a little bit of additional complexity, though, which is that if you look at kind of benefits, we can think about benefits as being for the whole population, but we know there are particular groups in the population who are particularly higher risk, maybe than others, where we want to make sure that we don't just look at an average for the whole population, that we also think about whether or not we're delivering a benefit as effectively for a subgroup of the population, perhaps people from a particular ethnic minority group, perhaps people living in a particular area which is very rural or something. And then equally around outcomes, there are actually two very slight differences around outcomes. There are some measures. It's very difficult to try and map measures onto outcomes. And, we've been, as you're going to see in the barometer measures, looking at where we have already, really good measures which actually relate directly to an outcome that we want. That's really helpful. But also there's lots of other measures which are around outcomes, but they're more contextual. They're indirectly related to the outcome as well. So what you'll see in the paper is we've given us the appendix. These are very busy slides, and I do sort of do and don't apologise for them, because this is just trying to kind of show you how that plays out in a couple of case studies. So this one's around diabetes, and if you just follow along the bottom, we've just, if you like, used those headings and given some examples of which measures might relate under each of those headings. And you'll just see that it's really a very simple process diagram, but it just gives you an idea about how those measures. This isn't comprehensive. This is an example around diabetes. This one here, for example, is an example around cancer. These aren't comprehensive. It's just as a way to just try and demonstrate the difference between those measures. So that's a little whiz through the first of the proposal, which is around a simple outcome measures framework for the ICS. And I'm now going to hand over to Liesl, who's just going to tell you a little bit about how we've then focused in on the green end of these diagrams, which is the area that relates to our integrated care strategy around population outcome measures and indicators, and how we've started to incorporate those into the strategy. So over to you, Liesl.
Thanks, Susanna. So what we've actually done, and I'll need to share the screen so I can show you actively where this is. Oh, there we go. Susanna's wonderfully done that for me. So within our strategy, as she said, it's on a web-based platform. We have a number of different drop-downs. So if you go into the different domains there, you can see some green headings that are the sort of the subheadings for the categories. So each of the Live Well domains has an overall heading. That's where you'll find the dashboards living. So we just open up an example of this one here. This is the Start Well domain. So there's a little bit of description just to begin with to explain how the dashboards work, and the fact that there's a colour coding key. What we have on here, it's a selection. It's a snapshot view of a selection of indicators. There are some direct outcomes, some indirect outcomes, and some of the benefits indicators that are there. So all of these, the principle behind all of these measures is that they're all publicly available. They're all in the public domain, and most of them come through the Office of Health and Inequalities and Disparities through the fingertips tool, so that we can keep them live and linked through. The figures that are there, these are updated monthly. So you can click onto any of these. They're all hyperlinked through to the source data. And you can see that what we're demonstrating in the colour coding is the trend of whether that's going in the right direction or not. So that RAG rating isn't an indication of whether we're doing better than another area. It's actually an indication of whether that particular measure is going in the right direction. So one of the examples you'll see there is the third one down, number of young people not in education, employment and training. There's colour coding of green for a couple of the locality areas. Another one, which looks like it has a better performing figure, is actually colour coded red, but that's because the trend in that one is going in the wrong direction. So even though the score is better, the trend is that it's a declining position, as opposed to the improving position of the other two areas. So broadly, that's what we have for each of these. As I said, they're all publicly available. They're all statistically robust. and you'll have the opportunity to go on to this and to sort of browse at your leisure. Where there isn't a colour coding, it's because it's not statistically significant to be able to show a trend within that data, that it's not measurable in that way. But all of the figures are still there and they're still live. The other thing that we're hoping to add in addition to these sort of general snapshot dashboards is a number of barometer measures. As Susanna said, we've worked with the Suffolk Public Health team to develop these. So these will be added to the subheading pages. So where we have at the moment a number of indicators that are there, those are quite static figures and they present a number of different pieces of data. What we're planning to add as an overall indicator for an important measure for each of these headings is a barometer measure, and these will be linked to the live graphs that come from fingertips and from other measures. So once you've agreed, hopefully, that we can go ahead with that, those barometer measures will be in there and you'll see a live link to a graph.
Okay. So thank you very much, Liesl. The paper that we've circulated to you has an appendix, a package of proposed barometer measures, which have been put forward by, you'll see some very detailed work from colleagues in Suffolk Public Health. Had a conversation with Lucy around those as well. These are national measures and they relate more to the kind of topic on the outcome we want for the population. Rather than anything more kind of operational. Chair, I'll just go back to the points, if you like. There's three issues that we've raised this morning. So the first is around the consistent framework around measures. The second is the incorporation of the dashboards into the strategy. And the third is the set of barometers that relate to the specific subsections of the strategy, which we would then start to add in so that they're live links, and that's the data point that we would start reporting on in terms of impact for the population overall. So thank you very much.
No, Susanna, Liesl, thank you very much. That was really helpful. What I'd like to do, though, if I may, is I'll bring in Zephan. Zephan's got a specific question on neonatal mortality, and then I'll bring in Lucy, because obviously there's great work here in Suffolk based and as you said, Liesl, so terrific brain power has gone into this, particularly from a Suffolk point of view. But let's hear directly from Lucy with an Essex perspective. So let me go first to Zephan. Zephan.
Thanks, Will. Very minor point. I think there's an error in presentation. It says the neonatal mortality is 5.6 and it's actually 5.6 per thousand rather than 5.6%. So when you click through, which is a thing I love about this, by the way, is you can click through and then see the underlying data. You see that's correct. But if somebody looked at this now and it is public, it would be misleading. They'd think it was 5.6% and it's actually quite a lot less than that.
Okay, so I saw Liesl nodding as you were speaking, Zephan, so we'll take that as noted and the necessary action be taken. Let me go to Lucy and then I'll go to Lisa. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Al. So as Susanna said, we've been through this, and Danny from my team has obviously been working with Suffolk Public Health team as well. But may I just congratulate Suffolk Public Health team and Anna in particular, and the team who have led on the development of all of these sort of dashboards and barometer measures. So firstly, I think this is a really great step forward because it just demonstrates the transparency and the accessibility that the ICP wants to operate with regards to the public getting access to the information about performance locally. And I think the other thing is, albeit that there are a number of measures and, you know, obviously we rely on the strategy, etc., to hone down on which ones we'll be doing first, it's important that obviously people understand that a number of these aren't just in the sole control of one organisation. Many of these measures, if we're going to kind of move the dial on them, will require our collaborative working. So I think it's a really nice space that, you know, we start to take collective ownership for some of the improvements that we're aiming to obviously deliver. The data, and Susanna and I have talked about this, is, we do need to make sure that there's an element of education both for our staff and the public, because data is quite often out of date just because of the kind of the cleansing process in the national publications. So we do need to make sure that we obviously do still have that much more usually sort of unclean or uncleansed activity data to hand as well, which sometimes we're not able to produce, to make sure that we have the whole picture. But I think it's a really good step forward. It's a brilliant way to lay things out, and the fact that Susanna's raised the issue about us understanding what the actual impact is, because the numbers are one thing, but what it means and what it translates to, and whether people genuinely are experiencing an improvement because of a change positively or negatively in data, is another kind of nuance and element. So I think it's a brilliant step forward with regards to the maturity of the reporting for the ICP. But my take home is, I don't think there's a single measure here that any one organisation can do in isolation. So it's about that partnership piece.
Yeah, and thank you, Lucy, for that. Well articulated. And I saw a lot of nods around the virtual table as you were speaking. So I'm going to take that as your points as agreed and rhetorical, unless anybody does raise their hand to come in. So thank you for that. Let me then go to Lisa, and then I'll go to Nikki.
Thank you. And so I was also thinking about the so what bit of the measures and the impact, and wondering about the relationship between the domains. So, for example, we know in the start well domain, if there is a good start for children, particularly in some of the measures in the start well domain around obesity and etc., that will impact longer term on the be well domain. So actually, how I don't know how we do it, but how in the longer term we can use the evidence of improving start well to understand how potentially be well could be improved, which might give us some evidence around funding decisions and system finances around making sure that the achieving be well starts in start well, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, it makes total sense to me, Lisa. I'm with you, and I saw a number of vigorous nods in support of that. But essentially, this is a never-ending story, isn't it? And there's no beginning and no end in this. So, unless anybody wants to come in again, I'm going to take that as agreed. Do you want to come in, Susanna?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, this is absolutely right. I mean, once you get into this area, it's fascinating, and we've made a step forward, but I'm really excited to see where we get to over the next couple of years with this. One of the big things is that I think that we've, and can I just say, it's Liesel's hard work that's really put the dashboards in place, and we've had huge support from Suffolk Public Health as well, but just want to, Liesel's really pulled this together. I think what we've done is exhausted what's available in terms of the kind of official measures. We've kind of really raked through them to see what we can do to kind of use those as indicators. What we need to get into, and I think what Lisa's leaning towards, is, okay, so what else do we need to measure to really know what's going on? And Liz and I working with Alex Royan and others around PHM to start to see, well, actually, where can we start to get some more nuanced measures in terms of that what's going on in the middle, and actually really challenging ourselves to ask, kind of interrogate the system a bit more. We're not there yet, nowhere near, but hopefully we can help everybody kind of move in that direction and start to kind of have some measures to back up our thinking and our hypotheses.
No, thank you for that. Just Nikki, I'll just hold you for a moment, if I may. Just let me check with Lucy. Lucy, is your hand on this specific subject?
It is, and Lisa's given me a lovely segue, really, to return to something that's already been referenced, but I don't think we probably laboured on it enough, which was the Hewitt review. So there is a not a requirement, because obviously none of the recommendations there were kind of binding in any way, but I think a responsibility for us to think as a system about how we actually start to increase the level of investment in prevention. Now, I'm not suggesting that would all therefore go into Start Well, but I think it's a good reminder about where we have greatest impact. And if we are really serious about prevention, that actually that primordials and the wider determinants and the primary prevention piece are going to be key. So yes, I was just trying to kind of take the opportunity to tag on the back of Lisa's comment about how important it is to make sure that we get things right in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're all on a similar hymn sheet here, aren't we? John, did I see you indicating there?
Yeah, but Nikki's been trying for some time. Why don't you do her first?
Okay. Let me stick with the list then. Thank you, John. So Nikki, then Peter. Nikki?
Thank you. Oh gosh, there's lots to say, but I'm going to be brief because I can see lots of people want to come in. Just on the point of the UIT review, I do agree with Lucy. I think it would be very helpful for us to have a conversation about that in the future when we've got the feedback from the government about their position on it. So obviously not now, but at some point in the future, it would be very good to have that conversation. So I just want to start by saying thank you very much for the information. There's a huge amount of hard work that's gone into this. And I just wanted to share with you some of my reflections around it, because obviously we all recognise it's complex, it's large, it's extremely important. What I'm going to say applies to other strategies we're going to discuss today at the Partnership Board. But how do we ensure that plans and process don't get in the way of actions and outcomes? And we have to hold on to the thought of there is no such thing as perfection. And we must say to ourselves, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. And with those things in mind, hopefully we can continue to push forward. But we know that it's very easy to get stuck in the process of the plans and the measures without the actions, delivery and outcome. So I just think we have to hold that in mind in everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Susanna, do you want to comment on, before I move on to Peter, specifically on Nikki's points?
Absolutely, Nikki. There's a colleague in the system who always says to me, I want to know not just about can do, but will do kind of thing. And one of the things that I'm kind of almost slightly relieved about with moving now a strategy to a flexible online thing that we continually update and evolve and improve and so on. And it's our tools for everybody, so we can start to add in, additional measures or reshape sections, whatever, is that hopefully we can get off the hamster wheel of having to then repeat this whole exercise every 3 to 4 years and actually gradually evolve something which is much more fit for purpose, and that, in 3 to 4 years' time, it would evolve to the point where it is different to what it is now, but we won't have done that by continually reinventing that. And also, I'd like to save colleagues from having to kind of sit down on a new piece of work. And, absolutely, I've been the first person to talk about the importance of starting with why and starting with the outcome. But if we can help people just shortcut that bit of the work and you can see it there and actually really focus, as you say, on, OK, so what's the benefit we're going to deliver and how we're going to do that, then I think we've done a good job. So hopefully this will be a labour saving device.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So let me just manage the questions now, and because I'm keen that we don't overrun, I'm going to go to Peter, then Nick, and then Nicola, Laura, and then John. And hopefully then we'll be able to get to a position where we agree or otherwise the next steps. So let me go to Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So Susanna alluded to it, but it would just be useful to understand how this dovetails with the national targets, because presumably there's a set of national diktats that come down and targets, and how are we going to avoid our framework being at sort of loggerheads to that? Secondly, we live in a resource constrained environment, so how are we going to weight the indicators and avoid the dash to sort out the red indicators and leave the amber ones and the ones that have most impact? And thirdly, I can see that we've tried really hard to avoid proxy outcomes, but there are still a couple, particularly around care plans, which might need to be looked at, because a care plan per se does not deliver anything. It's the underpinning of that and the delivery that's important.
Great. So 3 good questions there. Susanna, are you happy if I take another, say, 2 questions from Nick and Nicola and then come back to you in the interest of speed? So 3 questions there from Peter on national data weighting and proxies, shall I say. Let me go to Nick.
Thanks very much. First of all, excellent piece of work. The part on the outcomes I think is great. So couple of comments is primarily looking at the wider picture, whether we can explicitly pick out in this document that there's bi-directional feeds in associations as well. So we've picked out oral health, but oral health has a bi-directional feed into general health mental health and the like. So, and I think it's key to pick that bit out. And I would certainly say some of the measures that are incorporated, presumably this is going to be an iterative process, I think is excellent to show that SNEED to the rest of the country is we're actually concentrating on what we're doing. So this is great. If we've got an opportunity for an iterative process, some of the outcome measures on here are historical ones, certainly in oral health. And there's an awful lot more that could be measured that you could put in that would actually demonstrate a decent outcome in oral health and that bi-directional feed. So whether that could be incorporated as well. I'll stop at that stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Liesl, did you want to come in specifically now?
Yeah, just on that particular item, Nick, I have been working with the NHS Business Services Authority, who are in the process of making a lot of their data public. So that does give me a lot more measures on oral health that we'll be able to incorporate in that. One of the pitfalls at the moment is that there are a number of things that we could put as measures that aren't necessarily in the public domain. And one of the principles that we've stood by in putting these indicators through is that these are all publicly available, that they're repeatable, that they're sort of temporal, so we can measure them over time. So what I'm kind of having discussions with them is about being able to put some of these in the public domain, but at least in the meantime, to be able to publish some of these in the indicators section, if not necessarily on the dashboards. So where there aren't things on the dashboards, the idea is that hopefully we can put something that's static within the individual pages, and at least be able to sort of put the narrative and the story behind it.
Okay. And Nick, I saw you put your hand down, so that was obviously what you wanted to hear. I won't come to you unless you want me to. I'll go to Nicola and then back to you, Susanna, for the collection of questions. So, Nicola.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you, Chair. So I know we're short of time, but I did just want to really say that I don't think I've ever seen anything so comprehensive and thoughtful in terms of coming to a set of outcomes and measures. So that's brilliant, and I'd really like to pinch some of that methodology with pride, if that's okay, Susanna. I think that's great. Kind of do once and replicate. So we need to do some work locally. I just had a comment on the RAG approach. So I completely get the trend part of that, and I think that's really important. But I know that when seeing RAG ratings, people do instantly put things into either bad or good. And I just wondered if any thoughts had been given to mitigating that. Plus, I believe that there is an accessibility issue with red-green colour blindness, that you can use other colour combinations to indicate sort of good or bad. And I'm not sure that's completely helpful language around good or bad. But you can also use, and there'll be other people who are more skilled on this, but SPC charts, for example, to show where an intervention has had the impact that you're looking for and be able to pinpoint that. That may all sit underneath this, I'm sure, but I just wanted to make that point.
Thanks, Nicola. Susanna, I'll just hold. I'll come to you, John. I'll just hold you there. I'll go to Laura and then John and ask you to wrap all the questions, if I may. So Laura first, and then I'll come to you, John.
Thank you. It was just to describe that how we were going to be using these at Place, because we'll be supporting the work that Liesl and Susanna have done and applying these to our place-based approaches. But one of the things we're really keen on doing is then going further to look at our population cohorts and groups who are more susceptible to inequality. So we'll be using some of the more detailed data that's available on fingertips to enable us to do that, so we can have a much more targeted approach and really do what Lucy's suggesting. And I know that's in the JFP is around looking at where funding should be evidence and need-based. And that was something that recently came up from our partner discussions through our LGA facilitated workshops. So we're very supportive, and that's just to give you an idea about how we'll be supporting the ICP work at Place. Thank you.
That's great, Laura. Thank you very much. And John, sorry to hold you.
And it's all right. The reason I was getting excited, I want to come in on what Nicola said, but just firstly, join in the chorus of congratulations for brilliant work. B, I rely on Ed, Susanna, Lucy to make sure we make this the standard piece across I'd love to see it across the region, Will. And I'm not making the point here just because I'm going on about Essex County. But the more we are able to make place-based place-based and alliance comparisons across the county, the more we will be able to understand where we best spend our money. So if we could have a standard vocabulary, which I hope this becomes, it will help Susanna with avoiding reinventing the wheel every 3 or 4 years, but it will help us best use public funds for the goals that SNE has. On the point Nicola made, I'm just a bit thoughtful about the RAG rating piece as well, but for a different reason. I entirely take Nicola's point. Lisa described this as being green will indicate things are going in the right direction, red will indicate they're going in the wrong. But there's another dimension here. The question for me is, and if they're going, well, two things. If they're going, quotes, in the right direction, close quotes, are they going at the pace that we had wanted them to go or not? And secondly, actually, I'm afraid over the next 3 years, several things are going to go in the wrong direction. We all understand the links between deprivation and health. And we also know that deprivation will have increased on the back of what's happened over the COVID crisis, the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, the squeeze on real living wages, and all of that. And we have to accept, I believe, that some of these trends are very likely to be not going in the direction we wish. And that's why I just would want to understand that where we are doing better or worse than what we had planned to do is measured as well as just the direction of travel. And thirdly, Suzanne, just to pick up on a specific, you talked about premature mortality linked to cancer. I personally am interested in premature mortality. It happens in my friendship group, more people have died young because of diabetes than because of cancer. And that is the outcome. So there may be a particular interest in cancer related, and I can see why, given links to lifestyle. But it's actually, for me, the premature mortality and the disability adjusted life expectancy that are the strategic measures in which I take greatest, very long term credence. Thanks, Will.
No, thank you, John, and thank you for those thoughtful comments. And actually, thank you to you all for very supportive and actually intellectually challenging and interesting discussion as well. But let me go back to Susanna and Liesl to pick up what you can, Susanna. And it may well be that there's more discussions to be had outside the meeting, of course, on levels of detail. But over to you.
Absolutely. So very happy to have conversations outside the meeting, and Liesl in particular has the skill set to kind of, drill down into kind of, particular topics and so on. But just in the round, so the question about whether or not there's the national set of measures. So some colleagues will remember that there was a integration white paper last year, and that did propose a national set of outcome measures. Now, I'm not sure what's happened with that. It's not on the timeline that we were initially told, but we do know that there is some work at DHSC around a potential set of national outcome measures. And we actually met as an ICS, myself and other colleagues, Peter Fairley from Essex County Council and others, met with the team from the DHSC to talk about how we've applied outcome-based accountability in our system. It is of a lot of interest nationally, so we're definitely sharing that work. And as Liesl said, she's involved with a lot of those conversations as well. So yes, I think there is something on its way, but we've definitely got a voice in that conversation. The issue about weighting and prioritisation and place is interesting. So just to show you something else, which is on the website, if you want to go and have a look for it. So if you go into the best health and wellbeing, and you were to pick up, for example, Suffolk neighbourhoods, this is all of the different neighbourhood areas in around Suffolk. And if you click on these, it highlights what are called the plus populations and drills straight back to fingertips and those place-based needs assessments, which you'll have seen before. And the point of this is that you absolutely can go into really drill down into different issues. So the issue about weighting is really important. It depends on where you're trying to make a priority. If you're somebody in, I don't know, an integrated neighbourhood team in a particular local neighbourhood, depending on what it is that you're trying to prioritise, you might want to take this level of data into account. If you're planning, for example, where across the whole of Suffolk to put 2 community diagnostic hubs, you might want to take a different level of data into account. This isn't necessarily my area of expertise, but the point is that we just need to facilitate colleagues who are day-to-day making these decisions to have access to the right data. In terms of the feed, the bi-directional feed between areas, Lisa mentioned it, and Nick as well. Absolutely. And I think what we're interested in at the moment is whether or not we can build some tools to help to kind of structure that type of almost logic modelling. And we could do it in lots of different areas. I mean, John quite rightly said that, I pulled out an example of one outcome measure, which was the cancer one. We need to do it in lots of different areas, and we need to think about bi-directional feeds depending on what we're planning and what we're doing. The website is pretty comprehensive, but it's absolutely not as comprehensive as you think when you suddenly think about a particular group. So point taken, and we need more tools to do that. The other point I was going to make about links with other data is that if you do go into any of these specific areas, if I take the cancer example, there's not just indicators, there's qualitative data, there's information about people's lived experiences, reports from Health Watch, published evidence. If you're really keen, we can give you a further reading list with links. There's lots of stuff there. And there's also room at the bottom for lots of case studies as well. So please do send me from all of your organisations case studies, what you're doing, because we will include those things and link straight through from our strategy. So hopefully it's a place we can share that stuff as well. So that's important. Then the other point, so Nicola makes a good point about presentation. This was a little bit kind of a first attempt at how could we present this. Fortunately, when you click through to the fingertips data, that's actually presented, that they've had a lot more resource than we've had. And one of the things that's quite exciting is that you can, I don't know how you do it, but Liesl and some clever people in public health know how to do this. You can pull through a graph from the fingertips site. So when that's displayed, it will be slightly better, but we'll have a look at the colouring and see what we can do about that. And then John's point is a really good one about pace, is that actually outcome measures are all very well, but it takes a longer time for the needle to move on an outcome measure. What we might do is if we can measure benefits more, if we can have measurable benefits, we can say, well, actually, we have, it might be that an outcome measure stays static, but actually the benefit we've delivered as a health and care system has accelerated. And that might be partly how we kind of hold back the tide a little bit in the face of some of the challenges around deprivation, cost of living, increased waiting times, those sorts of things. So that takes us right back to the reason why it's important not just to measure outcomes, but to measure benefits as well, so we can be clear about how, at least with all of the challenges that people are facing, we're adding value as a health and care system. I'm not sure if I covered everything, but I'm really happy to have a conversation, Will.
Okay, no, that's great, Susanna. And in the interests of time, because I have allowed that to run on, that was a really rich debate and actually very, very supportive with and a lot of interest around the table, which was demonstrable. So thank you all for that. Let's go, though, to the next steps, because this is to approve or not approve. We've asked to do this in 3 parts. First of all, to approve the adoption of the proposed ICS measure framework based on an outcome-based approach, and then to note and approve the incorporation of the dashboards, subject to the discussion we've just had, of course, containing population measures to each section of the integrated care strategy, and then finally to approve the proposed suite of barometer measures for each section of the integrated care strategy, which are listed in Appendix 3 of the paper you had. Is everybody content to approve as requested? And I see no shakes of the head, no hands raised. Approved. Thank you very much. And thank you to all for that. The paper, the work that's gone into it from all, and the discussion, really valuable. I'm going to move us on, though, as quickly as we can to the next item, palliative and end-of-life care. Karen, your opportunity to discuss with partners. Over to you.
Thank you. Just sharing
now the slides. Is that visible to you, the
It's
slide then?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Great. Okay, so thank you. I feel like I'm hogging the agenda because this is the second time in a row I've presented to the group, so thank you very much. There have been 2 recent national reports on the quality of palliative and end-of-life care that have relevance to our system. And I just have the opportunity just to speak about the recommendations for those reports and how we are delivering against those recommendations. So you'll see a more detailed paper that I submitted. So I just wanted to pick out the key highlights, and I have a few slides. Really, I think the first thing that I want to say, and one of the take-home messages, is that the outcomes-based accountability population model that we are developing for palliative and end-of-life care in our system places us well to address these recommendations. I can't say that we've arrived, not all our outcomes are where we would want them to be, but you can see that these national recommendations really back up the approach that we're taking. That's work that I have been building in North East Essex for some years, and now we are rolling out across the system. So I'm just going to pick up just a few highlights. This population approach really gives us that suitable framework. So for any of you that are not aware, an outcomes-based population approach to end-of-life care really takes us, in the way that Susanna's been discussing, away from measuring how busy we are, our activity as organisations, but measuring the outcomes that people report. We did a co-produced piece of work developing 10 priority outcomes with our population that have been now accepted through Suffolk, and we are responsible for delivering the best possible outcomes across our whole population, whatever organisation that person is receiving their care from, and addressing any inequalities that we discover. And we're using data significantly. We are really developing our data work to make you see the outcomes for people, for example, in care homes on our coast, so that we can see what's happening across our whole system. There are 8 recommendations in the King's Fund report. I'm just going to highlight 4. So the first is that we develop an in-depth understanding of individual carer and carer experiences across our population. And one of the ways we're doing this is a monthly feedback survey. This is work that we're very excited about. It's quite early, but it gives us a chance to see the outcomes for people actually in the last year of life. Over in history, outcomes have really been around from bereavement surveys. You'll see that in the Voices survey that's on the ICS site. But what we have now is the ability to see the outcomes within a month's time frame. And these are some of the priority outcomes for our population. People want to receive the right care, they want their carers supported, they want their symptoms managed, and they want it to be treated with dignity and respect. And you can see here some positive early outcomes that we've got. This is from a patient survey system in North East Essex, and we now have a working group to see how we can use this across the whole footprint of the system. This will allow us to see inequalities. You can see here an inequality. This is very early data. Numbers are small. This is really too early to comment on, but you'll see here that we have a technology where we can see inequalities about people's perception of whether they're receiving the right care in relation to what the condition that they are suffering from. And this will enable us to commission accurately and precisely to address those inequalities. Another recommendation is that we increase understanding of the population needs. So this really, again, resonates with the work that we've seen presented earlier. We need to understand the needs of our population now and those in the future. So we have a predicted increase in the over 80-year-old population of 68% over the next 20 years. We will see more and more people facing end of life with complex frailty and comorbidities.
and an example about how we can understand really at a really neighbourhood level about the experience is, for example, how often are we being able to offer advanced care planning and access to, for example, the My Care Choices register. So sharing advanced care planning for our frailest frail. And you can see here that we have data available in North East Essex at care home level. So we can see what percentage of care home residents are having access to advanced care planning. And we have key data that shows if you have access to advanced care planning, your outcomes are improved. So we're already delivering against this recommendation and want to build on this work. And the next recommendation is that we maximise the use of this data to inform our commissioning decisions. So we've made specific commissioning decisions in North East Essex against some of this data, this really intricate data around specific care homes addressing inequalities. The fourth recommendation that I'll just highlight is that the King's Report recommend that we recognise, investigate and address inequalities in our end-of-life care. And you can see here a graph that shows 2 years of data. Each of these blue columns is a month. And this is data over about 2.5 years looking at our provision of anticipatory prescribing. And this shows that we've really narrowed the inequalities that are in our community according to deprivation. So here the most deprived quintile 1, initially at a real disadvantage and inequality that we now have addressed in the last couple of years. So we're really delivering against some of these King's Fund recommendations. And although, again, I'll say we haven't arrived, it was heartening to see that the case example, the only case example that the King's Fund cited was the work that we're doing in our system. So something to celebrate, but not sit on our laurels about. So these are the 3 recommendations that the King's Report made to ICBs. Ensuring that end-of-life care is a recognised priority, which we do. To ensure close working between end-of-life and generalist service commissioning, which we are increasingly developing with our integrated approach, and that we prioritise the relationship with local authorities and social care providers. And you can see that the data we have and bringing our social care colleagues into our integrated end-of-life groups is really a step forward. And we have care home managers in our North East Essex end-of-life group who are able to represent their residents across the system. So this is the support that we need. We're really looking for your support in us building our work. We have a patchworked approach at the moment. We have an unequal pattern of funding. So the North East Essex end-of-life group has commissioning funding and the others don't. So what we're really looking at doing is developing a consistent approach with consistent funding and building on the work that is delivering the better outcomes that we're seeing. What this King's Fund report and the parliamentary report both highlight is that now under the Health and Care Act, there is a requirement for ICBs to commission end-of-life specialist palliative care. And so we're really bringing to you that new requirement under the law and the fact that at the moment, specialist palliative care is only partially funded under grant funding. So that's something that we want to raise. We also want to build on the work that we've been doing in North East Essex and the Rosie project that we're launching in Ipswich and East around digital tools to capture people's advanced care plans. And we really need to move towards a whole system EPACs that can really use the learning that we've got and make that available for our whole population. I've just got one slide on the second report. This was the lasting impact of COVID-19 on death, dying and bereavement. This was a report from the all-party parliamentary group, and it made 4 recommendations. So the first was that ICBs fund palliative and end-of-life care according to the Health and Care Act. So we're really interested in exploring those conversations about how we can go from a part-funded to a fully funded model over the next few years. It recommended support and training for palliative and end-of-life care staff, and we have a whole work stream and training embedded within our work. So we feel that we are, progressing that work. It recommended that we help people to recover from the impacts of COVID-19. We're seeing significant increase in our bereavement referrals, but our bereavement services are at the moment within only a part-funded model, which is something that we wish to really discuss with ICV colleagues. And it also recommends that we learn from our pandemic. So there were tremendous steps forward, particularly around 24-hour single points of access, and the hubs that have developed in Ipswich and East and in North East Essex, and that have delivered rapid response service to people in the community. So we want to learn and build on the things, on those services that we've seen really deliver for our population. Okay, I will stop there and take any questions. Thank you very much.
Karen, thank you very, very much. That was really, really powerful. Karen, before, I don't see any hands raised yet, so before any come up, I don't want to put words into your mouth, so don't let me. But with respect to the King's Fund recommendations, would you summarise, is a summary of what you said, that we're on the journey, we're going in the right direction, and to get there, we need to keep going with impact and speed?
Yes, I think I felt that they were reflecting back to us the journey that we're taking. Yes, I think that's fair. And I think what I'm asking, I don't have specific requests to this group today. I think what I'm asking for you, as colleagues, is a continued support, really, and a backing of our population approach as we seek to build that and address the inequalities. And we have a little bit of a patchwork across our system at the moment. So we are working to try and resolve those inequalities and bring our learning for a cross-system integrated approach.
Okay, thank you very much. And John, did I see you raise your hand there?
No, you saw me raise my teacup.
Oh, his teacup, was it? Okay, well, I hope it was good tea, but do come in if you need to. And then let me go to Lucy.
It's just really, I feel like I'm sort of flattering everybody immensely, and I'm more known for being a bit of grit in the oyster, but actually it's just really refreshing. So I don't know if people know my background, but I started clinically as a district nurse, and I was always very upset, to put it bluntly, at the disparity in end-of-life care between cancer and a range of other life-limiting illnesses. And it's interesting to see your reflections there in some of the statistics, particularly around respiratory care, which unfortunately, because of the prevalence of smoking, etc., we're still seeing is a significant risk factor around mortality and premature mortality. So I really welcome this report. It's, quite often a very difficult topic that is challenging to get the public engaged in, but it's something that we need to do better, and we can only do it better if we talk about it more. But you have my full support. And although quite often people have a misconception that public health shouldn't be or wouldn't be involved in end-of-life care, there is a lot that we can do around tertiary prevention that can make, obviously, end-of-life care as optimal as possible, and provide everybody with as dignified and as comfortable a death as possible. So please do link us in where appropriate, but I'm just pleased to see some of those, although disappointed that we haven't made the progress, I'm pleased to see that we're being really open and transparent about some of the challenges that we need to address.
Thanks, Lucy. And yes, you're emphasising again that it's a system approach, it's a team game, and there's no end. And actually, you raised a good point about respiratory. It was a real standout in Karen's figures, wasn't it? Karen, shall I go to Peter, and then you can respond to Lucy and Peter? Over to you, Peter.
So, Karen, a couple of points. The elephant in the room for me is around that 68% increase in the over 80s, and the fact that they are likely to need palliative care. And so it follows that the challenge is creating capacity in the system to do that. And implicit in your slides was support and funding and all the rest of it. But I didn't see anything around building generalist capacity, and wondered where we were going with that as a system.
A good question. I'll hold you, Pam, if I may, for a moment. Let me go back to Karen to comment on Lucy and Peter's points.
So yes, thank you for your support, Lucy. There are other graphs I'd be welcome an opportunity to meet with you and show you some of the more positive data we've got where inequalities have been reduced. But thank you for your support, and yes, let's continue to work together to make that visible. Peter, I think you're absolutely right. We're both work in primary care, and we know that you can keep somebody out of hospital, and that's fantastic if that's their preferred place, but that will result in more district nurse and GP visits. So we built out the financial modelling of our North East Essex model that is funded based on showing that by improving community care and integrated working, we can divert end-of-life admissions in the last 90 days of life away from their predicted increase. And indeed, it has shown in the first year of our work that £1.2 million worth of admissions from what was expected were diverted and those patients were cared for in the community. And what we need to do is build on that model and continue to invest, and that would be both in primary and community care, for which we will need an ongoing conversation, because we can only grow that work if that resource is reallocated, and that's a very big strategic change. We are displaying a decreased admission rate in the last 90 days of life in North East Essex, but that funding currently isn't being diverted to reinvest in the future services. So we need to be in that, and I will need your backing as system leaders to make that grow, because otherwise it will fail, and we can divert people into the community, but the quality of their care won't improve.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for that, Karen. And Peter, I think we can take from you the message that we all need to have 68% plus 68% at the front of our minds going forward. So thank you for that emphasis. Let me go to Pam, and then we'll see if we can wrap and get a short break. So Pam, over to you.
Thank you, Will. And Karen's really just concluded by making my point for me about the importance of the community. And in Karen's presentation, she talked about the importance of links to local authority. I would just make a specific plea around local authority housing and the very special opportunity we have in local authority housing, because we have an influence over it to do something quite special in terms of end-of-life care, and through our enforcement role to make sure that private sector housing, which is often a real cause of concern, is what it needs to be when people are at the end of life. So I think that whole housing piece, extending into access to energy and warm homes and healthy homes, is critical. So my final point is, Karen knows this, but I just think the work she's doing is absolutely amazing, and I think I'd like to thank her for it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Go on, Karen. Yeah, I'll let you respond to that.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, absolutely, we need to work, very closely together. One of the areas where we're working with Essex County Council colleagues is seeking to embed the offer of advanced care planning and My Care Choices as part of the contracting of residential care places, for example, so that we bring these conversations right forward and not wait for our frailest frail residents. So that would be an example, and I don't know if there are any Essex County Council colleagues on the call, but really keen to see that work progress. And yes, there's many opportunities for collaborative working.
Okay,
thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Karen, for the presentation and the content as well, and the work of yourself and the whole team and players all stakeholders in the system. I think, again, that we have emphasised the importance of not only the wider determinants of health and specific roles, specialities within providers throughout the system, but also the whole team game, again, the whole system approach. So thank you you for that. I think, unless anybody is going to shout at me that they disagree, Karen, I'm going to summarise by saying that the ICP today warmly, whatever is stronger than warmly, welcomed your report, your presentation and proposals, and supported the way forward, and implored you and the whole team to keep going in this direction. So thank you for that. Okay, colleagues. No problem, Karen. Thank you. So, colleagues, 10:55. Shall we take a 10-minute tea break? Cameras off, microphones off. Stretch your legs, and we'll come back sharp at 11:05. Thank you very much, everybody.
No chance of finishing early then, anyway. This is really just got to a screen break. So who's there? It's obviously been very good. And you know about that, so it's just good. Okay, super. Okay.
Did you get your cup of tea, John? Oh, yeah. John, you've gone on mute. Oh. Not sure how that's happened.
Yeah, no, don't know. Well spotted though, Susanna.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't spotted that. Nevertheless, I think John's obviously nipped off to get somebody to. He's coming back now.
Unmute him. Yeah.
To unmute him. Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah. I think I've quite often said that centrally muting blind people is not a good idea.
No, it's not a good idea, John.
Fortunately, Yvonne was in the house.
Yeah, no, that is fortunate. Yeah, we don't know how that happened, but we'll look into it, John. But thank you and thanks to Yvonne for sorting it out. So, colleagues, welcome back. Hope you got a break and a refresh. We are running 10 minutes behind. I hope we can catch that up so that we finish on time, because I know that people will have commitments immediately after this meeting. So let's move on to our major focus, although we've had some big debates already today, but mental health. I'm going to hand straight over to Richard for the Essex mental health strategy. So Richard, all yours.
Thanks, Will. So we've got 4 different papers, as Will's alluding to, all under the mental health theme. And we're going to start with the Southend, Essex and Thurrock proposed draft mental health strategy. In the interest of time, Will, I won't go through in depth, but just to give you kind of an overview, and then we'll open it for discussion. And just to say, Zeph is with us today, and Zeph's been leading this with me and others across the SET system. I think Moira, unfortunately, can't be here today. So over the last 9 months or so, we've been working across the Southend, Essex and Thurrock landscape to effectively refresh our 5-year mental health strategy across that geography. I've been supported by an external partner called Tricordant, who've been helping us in developing that refresh. You'll see on the first page of the pack the core partners that have been included, so I won't read all those out, but effectively the 3 councils, the 2 trusts and the 3 ICBs and ICS teams. As part of the work, we've been doing effectively 2 things. One is the refresh of the strategy, but the second is also how do we actually take that forward as appropriate, both place and across the Southend, Essex and Thurrock geography, and what's the best mechanism for enabling us to do that. But sticking first with the refresh of the strategy, just to be clear, this isn't about replacing what's happening through the work we've been talking about here, or the joint forward plan or our alliance work. This is around actually where it makes sense for things that we should do together across the SET geography, and starting to describe and set some of that out. You'll see on page 3 of the pack the overall vision, the 3 key outcomes, and then under that a series of priorities, but broken down first for adults, and then secondly the table should read for children and young people. And these are still in draft stage. These are going through each of the 3 ICSs and the 3 local authorities over the next 6 weeks or so. So there's still opportunities to inform the document, the strategy itself. Sitting alongside that, as I alluded to, one of the challenges, I guess, that we came across as part of this work was actually it wasn't so much the content of the 2017 strategy. I wasn't involved at that point in its development. It was how we've actually implemented it. And if we actually took a critical look, a lot of what we said back in 2017, I would say we felt was still applicable today. And actually how we're going to ensure that we make the progress on the implementation of this across the complexity of that local socio-political geography across Southend, Essex and Thurrock. So one of the proposals that we've been working across the different partners is developing effectively an implementation group, which is where the appropriate representation from the 3 councils, the 3 ICBs, and our major provider EPUT and our major provider NELF for Children actually seek to work more collaboratively together where it makes sense. And you'll see on page 4 and 5 of the papers the main functions that we were suggesting that group could start to take a look at working collaboratively together. So an example, overseeing and monitoring the overall implementation of the strategy, delivering where it makes sense across the SET geography. So as an example, eating disorders, perinatal, embedded inpatient care are elements where we felt it was make sense to collaborate more appropriately across those partners rather than individually. Equally in crisis, mental health crisis, how could we work more effectively across Southend, Essex and Thurrock, building on the mental health crisis concordat group that EPUT chair at the moment within the system. And there's a number of other areas that you'll see there. Essex County Council has agreed, and thank you to Moira and others to help coordinate the group. And I've been asked, not sure why, but to help chair the group in its first 6 months or so to get it off the ground, which I've said I'm happy to do. I think this will be a bit of trial and error, if I'm honest. I think we need to see how we go with this, but there is absolute appetite from the major partners I named to come together and collaborate as we further develop and implement the strategy. The debate that we had quite a lot was, the primacy of place where it makes sense, which for a lot of this strategy absolutely is the implementation needs to be nuanced at local place level across the SET geography. But as I said, there are things that we felt we could do better more together across those 3 areas. So I'll leave it there. There's lots more I could say, and happy to open it up to any questions or reflections and comments.
Richard, thank you very much. And just a quick one from me. So you mentioned that there's opportunity for future dialogue from ICP members today. Is that direct with you, Richard? Are you happy to receive?
If you come to me in the first instance as the kind of the main rep for SNE on the group, and I'll feed that in obviously to my colleagues in the other neighbouring areas. Okay, and then the process is it will then go to the ICBs. And the county councils, and the ICP will receive future updates on a broadly 6-month basis. Happy with that, and also I should have said this is going to the North East Essex Alliance Committee in May, early May. So that's obviously where key stakeholders for that patch, which it mostly relates to, will have their opportunity to engage more. It's just the timing of the meetings. It was opportune to bring it, given we were talking about mental health more broadly today.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thanks, Richard. Let me go to Nikki and then to Ed. So, Nikki.
Thank you very much. So I was really pleased to see that it's all age. I think that's very important. There was just something for me about the ordering of it, because we've obviously got adults, children and young people, and I wondered if we could swap that order around to be children, young people and adults, due to the level of dependency and vulnerability of children. And also, I think it shows a level of priority that we give to children and young people. And in terms of our domains, Start Well is the first domain. So I wondered if some consideration to that could be given. There was also something for me around what's needed. I think it's on page 4 of the strategy, and what's needed for children and young people, because actually they won't be independent at that time. There's a reference to independence. They will not be independent. And I just think further consideration to the support that we give to parents and carers and extended family members as a vital support network for children and young people in terms of prevention, but also when in crisis. And I just wanted to share with you today that in North East Essex, we've had 5 young people under the age of 18 sectioned in the last 2 weeks alone. That is really significant. So, yeah, I would ask, please, could we have it as children, young people and adults? Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. I'll let Richard comment on that straight away.
So happy to take that back into the group, Nikki. I should have said Chris Martin's been the children's rep as part of the work as well. And if it's not already, it probably is helpful if it goes to your internal DMTs to get. I'm really keen to get wider engagement into it, but happy to take that back. Ditto with the comment on the parent and carers needing more reference. I'll pick it up with Chris and the team to see if we can get that in.
Great, thanks, Richard. Ed?
Yeah, thank you, Richard and colleagues. Excellent work. My question is just around the co-production element here. So there are rightly some very loud voices in the Essex community around mental health. So can you just give me some assurance we've been listening and helping to shape the strategy with the community?
I can probably give you a mixed response on that if I'm honest. So Tricordant have engaged with a number of different groups representative across South End Essex and Thurrock. We've had 2 workshops as well in the development of it. But in the time that we've had the approach, we've not gone completely from ground zero. We've built on the work that was done over the previous 5-year period rather than restarting, and also on the basis of the ICP strategy development in the 3 local patches. So it hasn't taken us the similar approach we did in Suffolk, where we almost started from fresh and took 18 months on. There was felt to be a trade-off to try and get this something in place rather than completely starting from scratch.
Before we go to Susanna, Ed, do you want to comment back on that? Have you got a concern you'd like to be picked up?
I don't know whether Rich is partially answering a different question, because there's something around the building on previous work. What I'm trying to get at is, would the community recognise this as a good strategy and their concerns are reflected in it?
I think it builds on the feedback we've had and seeks to do that. But ultimately, the audience, I guess we need to feedback and test that on is our local communities to check whether what we've produced now actually meets what they've asked for. So whether we want to go, and I'll pick that up with the group, whether we want to go back out across South End Essex and Thurrock with this as a final draft. Again, I'll need to pick it up with my peers from across the 6 to 8 partners. Zeph, I don't know if you're still on the call, and I don't know if you've got a view also. Obviously, you've been wearing 2 hats on this with EPUT and Mid and South Essex.
Yeah,
Zeph may have gone.
No, Zeph's still there.
He's presenting in a moment. He's still there.
He's still there. Yeah. Well, let me see if he comes in a moment, Richard, or maybe pick it up with him separately. Let me go to Susanna. Over to you, Susanna.
So I'm not sure if it's helpful with this, and I can discuss it the offline, Richard, but when we were engaging around the ICP strategy, I know that Healthwatch Essex said that they were getting quite a lot of feedback specifically around mental health. And obviously that would be from across Essex, South End Essex and Thurrock. So it might be really helpful to maybe ask if Healthwatch could kind of summarise the kind of key concerns and kind of key issues maybe raised with them, and do a little bit of a cross-reference. Could be just an additional section, and as Ed says, demonstrates that we're listening to those issues. So maybe raise that with Sam.
Great, thanks, Susanna. I saw Richard nodding, so I'll leave you to take that forward, Richard, in an appropriate way. Martin?
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate this is not in my Suffolk patch, but really welcome some of the content of this, and particularly the approach to addressing some of the wider determinants. And that's reflected in some of the I statements that are there on page 3, and also in some of the actions under prevention line. So recognising this is not just about services, but actually we need to address some of the context of people's lives, and the social, the environmental and economic determinants of positive mental health. That comes across within some of this reading. So yeah, really welcome that.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And John?
Yeah, well, Richard started by wondering why he'd been asked to chair us, and I think the answer is self-evident, Richard. It's about competence, and it's actually about, because we had to be clear here that this was not Essex County Council dominating that if we're going to get the change of behaviour to move away from the 2017 outcome, where joint working was agreed, but actually it's happened less, then having somebody of Richard's stature and sort of objectivity helps in that space. So that's very important. For me, the makeup of the implementation group, Richard, remains vital. We've got to ensure that we keep both competence and seniority around the table. And I think actually having Healthwatch there would be a very good idea. There are many concerns about the issues of dealing. It's very interesting for me, Will. We talk about physical illness, we talk about cancer, diabetes, and so on. We always talk about mental health. There are many concerns about mental illness across the county. And I would be saying that of the post-pandemic outcomes, the increase in mental illness has been the biggest single trend line for me, actually. And so clearly there are issues that we have around the piece. And so we do need to take, Richard, into account the community piece. I got what Ed was saying. Equally, however, we cannot be sidetracked by some of the other noise that is going on, and that's a bit of a worry here. And I do want to say, Will, among the papers today is the EPUT strategy. EPUT is the subject of various inquiries at the moment, and of what is likely to become a statutory public inquiry. They thus become the tainted brand, but actually the bulk of that public inquiry relates to what went on from 2000 to 2015 before EPUT even existed. It's about previous pieces. So I just, we just need to be cautious about this bit going in. I will say no more than that. I like the focus on prevention, Richard. Interesting, Will, we've talked a lot today about shifting resources to prevention. Maybe one thing we can think about is how we make sure ICP agendas feature prevention more as much as possible. And Nikki, yes, do please make sure that the children's services are fully tied up with, if Chris is representing you, I'm actually all age mental health in my responsibilities. So let's make sure we're truly joined up so that we give Richard every support we can. Thanks, Will.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And Richard, what I'll do is, unless you actually want to come in with a specific response to any of the points that have been made, but specifically John's, I'll take it as noted and that you'll take it forward through the group in your role. If I go to Zeph, let's hope Zeph's microphone is working. And then Zeph, if you could pick up the point that Richard asked you to pick up, and then if you like, you can roll straight into your next presentation if that works for everybody. I'm just conscious of time. So over to you, Zeph.
Thanks, Will. I'm really sorry. I was desperately trying to come in earlier and I couldn't manage it, and then I seem to just be showing up as a background as well. So we've had some Teams issues at EPUT after a national upgrade related to the trust. So two things on this from me. So firstly, really endorse this strategy, and I'm saying that as an executive director of EPUT, but I'm also saying that as the SRO for mental health at Mid and South Essex ICB. As Richard described, and John alluded to the partnership working going on across all local authorities and ICBs in the county of Essex. This strategy has really been put together in collaboration across a number of organisations with a clear common purpose to improve people's lives and to make a difference for those at risk of or suffering from mental ill health, adults and children. So I really wanted to endorse that from the partnership perspective, and also the fact that we've got clear proposals on how to implement this and work together. The formation of a shared strategy implementation group is going to be essential to seeing the change that this strategy sets out delivered. We've really appreciated Richard's contributions to that, and hence the proposal that myself and others made that he'd be an excellent person to chair that in the first instance. So hopefully that kind of picks up the key points, Will.
No, that's great, Zeph. Thanks. And Richard, I think if you're happy, do come in. with a small one.
Just one little comment back to John. Just to say on the proposed implementation group, the membership of that will be wider, so it will involve both Health Watch. The bit we're trying to work through is how do we best get the voice of those with lived experience and the voluntary care and social enterprise sector when the geography is so huge across so many different organisations. And we've not, I think it's fair, Zeph, isn't it? We haven't absolutely nailed that one yet. but we are clear that the implementation group does need those wider voices on it. So any ideas on that, let Zeph and I know, because obviously we don't want to cast the thousands, but equally we want to make sure we're inclusive as possible. Excuse me. So we haven't nailed that one down yet.
Happy to catch up offline.
Okay, John, thank you very much for that. And Richard, thank you. And I think before I go back to Zeph for Zeph's paper, Richard, I think the overall summary is thank you for great work and ICP support for this work. Keep going, and we look forward to the updates.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And Zeph, over to you for the strategic plan for EPUT.
Yeah, thanks. I'm delighted, colleagues, to be able to present this strategic plan to Integrated Care Partnership. This has been approved by EPUT's board at our public meeting in January and is here for noting and sharing with colleagues. You'll see strong resonance between the mental health all-age strategy that's just been presented by Richard and the strategic plan, and that's no accident that we've worked really closely together, and these two documents and ambitions have been developed with shared purpose. I think it's absolutely right to note the point that Councillor Spence made earlier. EPUT is operating in a context of a high level of scrutiny. There's an independent inquiry going on, and the status of that is being discussed and considered, and rightly is looking into an extensive terms of reference so that there can be learnings both locally and nationally, and we fully support and welcome that. This strategic plan is really clear in its ambition to put service users and families at the heart of what we're doing. It's been informed by extensive engagement. We've met with service users, we've met with staff, we've met with partners, we've done extensive interviews, and we've really listened to how the organisation can improve and where we need to focus. So I said the words, I'm proud to present this when I presented it to board, because for me, particularly as an executive who's joined EPUT only in the last year, I've been there for a year now, this really sets out the ambition that Paul Scott and the executive team have for the trust to develop that culture of learning, to put service users at the heart of what we're doing, and to make improvements across a wide range of services, while also celebrating the success of excellent service provision, which exists across many services at the moment as well. So I hope it presents a balanced picture. You'll see that there are 4 strategic objectives set out. And then for each of those, we've explained the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve and clear priorities. The strategy starts with an understanding of the health needs across the county of Essex, including Southend and Thurrock, and then progresses to what we can do to make a difference. I won't attempt, Will, to reproduce it all here and now, but I would say, colleagues, please do have a look at the video that launched this as well. It's on our website. I'm happy to provide the link. It's an excellent video that describes our staff saying what this strategy means to them and a number of service users as well. So pleased to present it here and really welcome comments and feedback and questions on that. Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Zeph. Zeph, would it be fair to say that a very big part of your 23-28 strategy going forward is working in partnership with others across all system players?
Absolutely. I mean, that is our second strategic objective. We will work with our partners to make our services better. And you know, we've set out really clearly our vision to be a leading organisation in the provision of mental health and community care, and our values as well. I just voice those for colleagues. We learn, we care, and we empower. And we care for people every day, and what we do together matters. So that's really the culture and the ethos that we're driving in the trust, learning from the past, learning from experiences as we go, and really putting service users together, but doing that with our partners. And I think we've really welcomed the support of colleagues from the Integrated Care Boards and all 3 of our local authorities in how we do that, and their input to these strategies as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So, colleagues, any questions or points for Zeph on this paper? Lucy, over to you.
So I really welcome it. I think it's really helpful. Certainly as not a complete newcomer to Essex anymore, but certainly somebody who hasn't necessarily understood the journey that EPUT's been on, and have arrived at a point where, like you say, there's a huge amount of scrutiny, and I can only imagine how challenging that is to maintain momentum and the morale of staff when you are being scrutinised in such a way and yet you still have your business as usual to deliver. So I congratulate you on the fact that you've managed to bring staff together, but it's clearly been co-designed with a lot of input from people within the organisation. And I'm really pleased to obviously see a big emphasis on prevention and addressing inequalities. If I'm really honest, and this is a reflection on the fact that we've been sort of resetting public health in Essex County Council as well, that although we've articulated that mental health is one of the sort of 5 priority areas that we're going to be focusing on, I don't really believe, although we've been inputting into various strategic development documents, etc., that we've got clarity around what that looks like from a point of view of actual change and actual sort of different practice and improved outcomes. So, Zeph, I'd really welcome a conversation offline with you about what certainly public health and ECC can do around supporting you on this journey.
Okay, I saw Zeph nodding there, Lucy, so we'll leave you to set that up between you outside the meeting. Ed?
Yeah, thanks, Zeph, for the excellent work. So we had a bit of a masterclass on measurement earlier in the agenda. So just some views on how we're going to measure the impact of the strategy so that we can build that momentum that you talked about.
Thanks, Ed. So we've set out in the strategy for each of the strategic objectives a set of outcomes, sub-outcomes, and then delivery measures. And you'll see quite a lot of resonance with some of the overall population measures that we talked about earlier. You'll see some difference as well in those tables. The reason for difference is I think, you know, we're in the strategy here, we're not just focused on those outcomes at a whole system level, we're also wanting to be able to show how we as EPUT are making change to our services. So that does necessitate some difference in some of the measures there, as well as how we're working with our partners and so on. So we've set out a number there. We've committed also to report regularly and publicly at our board on the progress that we're making against this, and we'll continue to do so. And in that spirit of openness and progress and reporting, I'd note for colleagues that we reported on the progress against our Safety First, Safety Always strategy, 2 years of progress on that at our public board in March, and set out priorities for the next year, very much focused around that safety agenda. I would also note for colleagues, I know we've put this together with the mental health strategy, but EPUT also provides physical health community services as well. So I wouldn't want that to get lost in colleagues' understanding of what this strategic plan seeks to do. Indeed, integration of services across physical and mental health, between social care and healthcare, and between primary care and secondary care is absolutely entwined throughout this strategic plan, and is really how we see EPUT as providing the most value to our communities, as being a real advocate of integration between service and a person-centric approach.
Okay, Zeph, thank you very much for that response. And colleagues, we're asked to receive a note and support to the extent that we want to. I'm going to take it that the ICP today is very supportive of the strategy as articulated in the paper and by Zeph, and with the additional comments and thoughts raised by colleagues in discussion. Is everybody content that we move on and say thank you very much, Zeph, and keep going on the journey? So let's then move over to Kath. So Kath, I'm going to come to you for an update on improvements at NSFT. So all yours.
Thank you so much. Would you like me to whiz through the slides, Will, or just talk through?
I think you can take it as the paper's read, Kath,
Lovely.
but if you're happy to talk through, should we do it? Yeah.
Yeah, no problem at all. And I'll try and be brief to give more time for any discussions or questions. So hopefully colleagues will have had the opportunity to read the paper, and the spirit of the presentation that we've got across really is about the fact that we recognise the significant improvements that we've made within NSFT that was observed in the CQC inspection and therefore the subsequent report. But it is really tempered with humility and recognition that there is still a huge amount of work to be done. But it is really important that we recognise that NSFT has got a long history of not feeling able to actually celebrate success. And where it's really important is not about celebrating the brand of NSFT, but the people within NSFT. And actually, that's why it's so important to say where things have improved, because that's as a result of the work delivered by many of the 5,000 people who work for us as an organisation. And it is time that they're able to feel proud about working in an organisation that is improving. But the key measures of note from the inspection programme and as a result of our significant and quite robust improvement programme is obviously the improvement from requires improvement. But we do remain in what was known as special measures. So we remain as part of the recovery support programme and are working very closely with system colleagues and NHS England in relation to what needs to be done and how we need to provide rigorous assurance of our ability to improve in our journey. So positives you'll see on the slides in terms of the overall ratings, and we are good for caring and of course requires improvement for the other 4 domains, which is a significant degree of progress. But no organisation aspires to be requires improvement. But it is important that we recognise that progress, but on our journey. You'll see the more detailed colour slide with the tiles relating to the services, and 60% of our services are rated good, which again is very positive. Again, the balance with the positivity is the trust has a yo-yo history in relation to improvement and then deterioration. So again, everything I'm saying is tempered by the recognition that we've got to sustain the improvements and continue on them on our initial journey to good. So lots of work has been done over the last 12-18 months. Lots more grey hairs amongst key people within the organisation, I will say, but some of the specific areas of focus and the improvements are identified within the paper. So particularly a focus on the environment, where there has been improvements in relation to ligature risks required across the organisation, but also an area of focus has been about it's really not reasonable or acceptable that the trust identifies where our problems are as a result of external inspections. So actually understanding what's going on more within our own organisation has been a critical feature of our improvement programme, and having a much more robust governance arrangement, so that we know from essentially the equivalent of board to ward what's going on within our organisation. 3 areas of real focus as part of our improvement programme relate to demand and capacity, our model of care, but the thing that I'm leading personally on relates to the culture within the organisation. And there is no question, as an organisation, we've got some really challenging cultural behaviours and very entrenched. So we're not deluding ourselves in relation to the fact that we'll be able to turn this around and make the organisation have a positive culture in the next 12 months. I would say this is probably a 4 or 5 year programme. But the thing I think we're very proud of is the fact that we've really explicitly and publicly named our problem. We have racism, misogyny, homophobia, and quite a prevalent clique culture within the organisation. And the first thing you have to do before you can tackle it is to take responsibility and give it a name and allow it to be talked about, so that actually it is not underground behaviour. So we are making steady progress on that, and we've been able to recruit some really outstanding people. So particularly Harpreet Hockley, who some of you will know, is our Director of Culture and Organisational Development. And she specifically chose to come to NSFT on the basis of that transparency and commitment to be open and honest about our culture. That's what drew her in. And for me, the strength in the way forward is about how we attract really strong candidates because of our honesty and our journey for our improvement. So actually, I think I'll stop talking, Chair, if that's okay, rather than me keep going on. But very happy to take any questions and comments.
Kath, thank you very much for that. And I know the colleagues around the virtual table today will have appreciated the improvements that you've made, but also appreciate the fact your word was you don't want to yo-yo as NSFT has yo-yoed in the past, and I think we'll all appreciate that. But I'm sure what we appreciate more than anything else is the honesty of this approach and the openness and transparent, and that it's that cultural change, isn't it? That if you don't change the culture, you won't change the outcomes, will you? So I think we're totally with you on that. Thank you very much. So let me just see if there are any comments or hands raised from colleagues. I don't see any. No, I was too fast, Kath. Sorry, they're all flooding in. Okay, let's go to Nicola and then Zeph and then Ed. Nicola first. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Kath, for sharing that, and really echo the words around kind of the honesty and openness about that, and the recognition that, of course, there are still areas to improve, as there are in all organisations, and there are parallels with things that we've experienced in our organisation as well. So, really appreciate that. I wondered if you could kind of pinpoint the things that have really made the most difference, and this is really from a selfish point of view as much as anything else. What are those things as leaders that we can do that really make the difference?
Do you mean in general or focusing on the culture, Nicola?
Yeah, sorry, around the cultural piece, because I think everything else follows from that.
Absolutely. And so I think that coming into the organisation fresh, which helped, was I was the new person. And actually, so I had a fresh pair of eyes, so I could see things from an external perspective, but also people would come forward to me as the new person in the organisation in a position of influence. But in reality, I think it was a combination of not perpetuating the culture of it being an underground accepted behaviour, talking about it openly in forums amongst our Here to Listens, which is across the whole organisation, calling it out, apologising and saying when we got it wrong. And then actually what I would say made a big difference is the openness of our board. So it didn't take much for me to say that this is a major problem and we need to do something about it. And immediately Zoe and Stuart both agreed in September board in public, we would call this out and we would have a very explicit public facing acknowledgement of our problem. And so in that, over the summer period, things came out that we observed, but we quickly took action. And that was the basis for our whole culture programme of talking about it in public and not trying to fix the problem whilst presenting the problems, but just letting the problems land, if that makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah. Thanks, Kath. Zeph?
Yeah, I was just really to welcome that openness, Kath, with which you presented it, but also to acknowledge that progress that you've seen in the CQC's recognition. And I've worked closely with Harper. I know that she's excellent and a great addition, and I think there's lots that we've already been doing between working together between EPUT and NSFT as part of a shared mental health collaborative across the east of England for specialised mental health services, and we're already working together trying to learn from each other as well. And I think that spirit of openness that you've described with Stuart's leadership, and we're trying to do the same under Paul's leadership in EPUT, I think is key. We know nationally that there's a national improvement programme being launched for inpatient mental health services, and there's a real focus on improvement across the country in this. And I think it's great to hear about how that's been progressing in NSFT and what can be learned for others.
Thank you, Zeph.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. And I know that Kath and the team and Zoe, including Zoe, will have appreciated that support. Let me go to Kate, and then I'll go to Ed for the last word, if I may. So, Kate.
Thanks, Will. So I've got 3 screens on the go. I couldn't move my mouse across. And Kath, lovely to see you. I was just going to... a lot of what you say sounds very familiar from an EE's perspective, especially around the cultural piece. I was just going to, and I love that Harper is now on board, and I'll reach out to her directly, but I just wanted to offer support and make sure that we are sharing notes, because it is such a slow burn and there's so much learning that probably would be useful to share. And also, just on your slide 15, can we be on there as well as part of people that you're working collaboratively with, because I think that we probably should be as close as possible on some of this. And we're also talking to those partners, especially the police, from a cultural perspective with the blue light hat element, and your fire services. So it would be good just to link all the bits together.
Yeah, yes on all counts, Kate. Thank you.
Fab.
Okay, thank you for that. Colleagues, Ed, over to you. Final word.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, thank you, Kath. I mean, Kath and I worked closely together about a year ago, and I was delighted when she joined NSFT, and she hasn't disappointed. So what a fantastic contribution she's made to our community. So thank you, Kath. Kate's made the point I was going to make. Really, the Ambulance Trust is showing courageous leadership on this agenda, just like you are, just like EPUT are. So it's great that organisations are sharing that experience and that learning. I think that's really encouraging for the East of England as a whole.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Ed. And on that positive sentiment, Kath, I think we'll say thank you for all the great work, but we realise it's a long journey. You've got our support. We want you to keep going.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, colleagues, I'm going to then go over to Richard for the so that we can note the Suffolk Mental Health Collaborative. So, Richard, all yours.
Thanks, Will. It follows on really nicely from Kath's update, and those of you who've been around on this journey with us for a number of years will recall that when we first started developing the 10-year strategy, it was a recognition in part that actually the answers to our challenges that our local communities face on mental health is much wider than one provider, i.e. NSFT, and that actually the strapline, I still think it resonates and stands, mental health is everybody's business across Suffolk, is actually still our key commitment. So just to echo everything everyone else has said on a personal basis to Kath, I think we've made brilliant progress, but actually if we're going to really make that real step change, we need to move and see as a system, as a collaborative, how we're going to turn the dial on those outcomes for our population. So that's what this paper is really all about. I'm not going to go through it in depth because hopefully you've had a chance to flick through, and it is quite technically based, but in essence, cutting to the chase, what we're looking to set up is what we're calling the Suffolk Mental Health Collaborative, which effectively is all the different partners, and we can come back to the list, Kate. I want to have a chat separately with you on that. Actually, how can we have one place, one collaborative where this planning and decision making comes together across local government, our health providers and the ICB? And what we've got here is a paper that has gone through our Integrated Care Board, has gone through NSFT, ESNEFT, West Suffolk, and is going to the Suffolk County Council's Cabinet next month, which all of their major partners are endorsing setting this up. You'll see in the detail that we're looking to have it as all age, that it will have it's a delegated committee of the ICB, so that delegated responsibility for commissioning and then through that hopefully delivery of mental health will sit. The council is also just working through what that means for them, because obviously it's slightly more challenging in terms of what that will look like. But there's Alan's, I think, on the call with us. There's absolutely a commitment from the county council to utilise the collaborative for appropriate decision making around mental health. You'll also see in the paper that we've started to work through exactly what the collaborative is. So I'm almost describing, and we've used this before, haven't we, Susanna, with the ICS being almost the circle, which there's a number of things within it. I'm also describing that for the collaborative. So don't get in your mind the collaborative is just a committee. The collaborative is all of the work we're doing in Suffolk around the mental health work, of which there's a committee or a group in the middle. There's a variety of different mechanisms and forums where we're working through this. The other element I need to come to is Waveney, which has often been the kind of the challenge where we're trying to do things on a county basis. So what we've agreed across the Norfolk and Waveney ICB and the SNE ICB is that particularly for children, so children's mental health, that will be a delegated responsibility from Norfolk and Waveney into the Suffolk Collaborative. and there'll be appropriate representation from Norfolk and Waveney's ICB as a standing member of the collab committee. And I think that's quite a welcome development, and enables particularly Suffolk County Council to actually start to look and work and plan with NSFT and other partners mental health services on a county basis, which is welcome. Final thing to say in terms of what would those first priorities be, and again, this is building on the work we've been doing in Suffolk for the last 4 years from the start of the strategy, is that we're going to look to do a stock take of that strategy 4 years in, and actually where have we got to in terms of the development implementation. We're also looking to obviously get the architecture set into place around what the collaborative will do and the bits of it. And then our priority areas is children and young people's mental health. So there's some exciting work now really working through between Suffolk County Council and NSFT about how they can more formally partner in the delivery of mental health services. Our talking therapies, so our IAPT as it once was called, services, we're really looking at how that could be done more collaboratively across our primary care colleagues, our mental health trust and other parties, and more broadly our community mental health model as part of that. So there are 3 big areas that we want to focus on. The rest of the paper talks around what the membership of the group, that committee could be, and also what the underpinning supporting infrastructure could look like, of which just want to pick out some of the advisory forums that we're looking to build on. One is a clinical and professional forum. The second is a lived experience forum. And the third is VCSE network. And the chairs of those would all have a seat around the table of that collaborative committee. So again, we're just working through how all of that would work. Resourcing, there is no particular lots more money for this, but what we are excited to say is that we are looking to develop a change delivery function that the collaborative, probably hosted by one of our partners, where we actually group together some of our resource to actually help drive the delivery on the ground within Suffolk. So we're just talking particularly between the council, NSFT and ourselves around what that could look and feel like. So I'll leave it there, and happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. And Richard, did you say right at the beginning you're going to pick up outside the meeting with Kate on?
Yes, it would be my pleasure.
So we take that as an action then, that'd be great. Okay, thank you. And colleagues, any questions for Richard? Is that Joanne?
It is, yes. Yeah. Sorry, I've got my camera turned off. I've got a swollen eye, so it doesn't look pretty. So my question is around, obviously this talks about Suffolk Mental Health Collaborative, and I'm sat in North East Essex. So is this going to be, is this happening as well, where there's an Essex-wide collaborative happening? And my second question is, it's saying changes to the delegation of budgets. But if the budget, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, but if the budget's coming down to the ICB and the ICB is Suffolk and North East Essex, then are we saying that Suffolk is going to be handling the mental health budget for North East Essex, even though they're not in the collaborative? I can see you shaking your head, Richard. Have I got that wrong?
No, that's all right, Joe. They're both good questions. So the second one I'll take first. No is the answer, because we still have separate disaggregated budgets by the old CCG boundaries and teams, etc., and contracts. So anything to do with the North East Essex geography would not be part of the Suffolk Collab. So that's our staffing, our budgets, etc. On your first point, it links back to the paper I presented earlier, which talked around an implementation group. We're deliberately not calling it a collaborative. We haven't landed that. I think it's fair looking at Zeph as well. But actually, a lot of what our aspiration would be over time, possibly to look where it makes sense to move in that direction. The challenging bit, obviously, in the SET geography, is it's just more complex. 3 upper tier local authorities, 3 ICBs, etc. So we just need to kind of take a bit more stock in the Essex geography of whether or not we did move completely in the same direction, or through that implementation group that I alluded to, can we get the best out of it through that mechanism, or would over time we want to move further? So I should have said also, Joe, obviously you're part of our North East Essex Alliance mental health group. That's where all the work still will sit within North East Essex at place. We'll effectively linking to the SIG group I described earlier for Essex.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Seth?
Yeah, I think you described that well, Richard. Across Essex, Southend and Thurrock, there's 3 ICBs and 3 local authorities, as well as multiple providers. So I think we're moving in the same direction in terms of the overall approach of working more closely together, taking aligned approaches to how we commission and provide services, etc. But the strategy implementation group isn't a formal collaborative like this is, but it certainly shares the same sorts of ambitions across Essex, Southend and Thurrock, and we'll progress and develop that, particularly over the next year, and bring that back to colleagues in due course.
Thanks, Seth. And then Kirsten.
Thanks, Chair. Not a question, but just a comment to say that the voluntary sector has been involved with this work for a long time, since the inception of it. And it's not always been easy. The early days, there were a lot of conversations, but I'd just like to say it's a really good example of partnership working. And we're really pleased. I think we feel very much an equal partner and happy with the collaborative approach. And we're currently searching for someone to be our representative on the collaborative. So it's working well. And I thought that should be said.
Thank you. I'm
Thanks,
sure
Kirsten.
that's appreciated. Yes, thank you. Richard, I've got a couple more. I've got, Peter. And then I think after Kate's hand's gone down, I think we'll take Peter and then we'd better move on. Otherwise, we'll overrun. So Peter.
Richard, this might be one to pick up outside the meeting, but PCN and GP representation is a perennial issue. But on this particular topic, I think it's really quite important that we have PCNs in the room rather than outside of the room because of the way the models flow. And so my question really is, are we achieving that, or do we need to strengthen it in some way?
You and I are meeting later on, I think, today, Peter, so I'll probably go into more detail with you then. But just very quickly, at the moment, Suffolk GP Federation are representing through their role with you. However, I think I'm up for whether the PCNs, a rep in each of the 2 alliances, would like to avail themselves of the opportunity of joining. So could we maybe pick that up this afternoon and see what you think?
Great, thank you, Peter. And John, did you want to come in? Did I miss your hand?
No, Richard once again explained the position brilliantly. I just share with people, this may sound very complicated. I would say Richard's out to create all the characteristics of a collaborative without calling it. If I was sitting in Southend or Thurrock, Essex here is a minority player on this ICB. We don't let that worry us. But the ratio of population is something like 2 to 1, maybe slightly different. If you're sitting in Southend or Thurrock and you've got Essex County Council sitting next to you, and the population of Essex is 8 to 10 times your population, you may worry sometimes about share of voice. And so I'd always want to be sympathetic and empathetic to their needs. So Richard's going to do a brilliant job, characteristics of a collaborative without being called it.
Okay, I'll take that.
Thank you for your confidence, John.
It is absolute. Don't let me down.
Like Gordon Ramsay there. Right, okay, so with that, I think we're going to take that was a very positive discussion, Richard. The paper is well received, the direction of travel is supported. There's some, this isn't ever going to be an end, is it? It's not. This journey is continuous, and I think we recognise that. So with our support, with the ICP support, please take the matter forward in the way that you've described.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, so we have 5 minutes or a little less. I'm going to go to Susanna for Expo 23. Over to you, Susanna.
Okay, I can do this in 2. So hopefully the majority of you will remember a lovely sunny day last July when we held the very first meeting of our Integrated Care Partnership and also our new NHS Integrated Care Board. We had just over 1,000 stakeholders from across the ICS who came together through our Expo 2022 event. So there's a few memories from that. What I wanted to do was to put this date into your diary. We're aiming to have another Expo event this year. It will be on Friday, the 7th of July. This time it's going to be at Worsted Park, which is just to the south of Ipswich. The kind of key theme for this year is about the fact the future is now. time to value every voice in health and care. And you'll see that the themes for our exhibition zones are a little bit different to last year. We're plan to have a social care exhibition zone. We will have another community zone, valuing lived experience zone, and research and innovation. But there will also be some generic space as well. So the rules are really simple, and it's this, which is that everybody and every contribution is welcome. If you look on the bottom, there is now a web page, which the link is on your agendas for the web page for the event, and on there there are forms for anybody who would like to put forward an idea for a workshop as part of the programme, or would like to have a stall. We'll include you in some way. I'll keep you posted. We already have a few of the kind of keynotes and things like that booked, but I'm gonna wait a little bit before we announce those, and I'll send some information around online about that as well. But any ideas you've got for that, please talk to me. We're literally just starting to shape the programme now. Hope that's helpful, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. Let me move us into any other business, but first of all, I'll go to Michelle. Michelle, any questions from the public?
There's none at all, Will.
Oh, no questions from the public. Thank you very much. In which case, Susanna, I'm going back to you for the system learning events in April and May.
So these are the next two kind of events that we're running under the auspices of the ICP. So next Friday, a week today, we have a workshop which is going to be led by an organisation called New Local. They produced a report which I know is of interest to a lot of people in the system, called Community Powered NHS. So that's taking place via Zoom next Friday morning. Again, details on our website, or just drop me a line and I'll send it to you if you haven't had it already. And then for May, we're actually standing down the meeting of the ICP to make way for some space to hold a System Leaders Away Day, to reflect on the winter that we've just come through. Again, I've written out to you all about that. Many thanks to everyone who's been in contact with me so far. I'm meeting with lots of you to discuss how you're going to contribute to that day. But that is an away day in person at BD Industrial Park, and it will replace the ICP meeting that was planned already in diaries for that morning. So I hope that's helpful, Chair.
Thank you, Susanna. And with that, colleagues, it's dead on 12 o'clock. We'll close the meeting, say thank you to you all for attending this morning, and the fantastic contribution, level of contribution and intensity and enthusiasm is huge. Thank you so much for it. The next meeting of the ICP, as Susanna has just explained, is not May, but is the 9th of June. So next meeting, 9th of June. Thanks very much, everybody. Well done.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
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 Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Is that it? I think that's it.
I've taken John out for him. I've Jackie Weavered him.
I think he'd gone to find Yvonne to do it for him anyway, hasn't he? So, yeah.
What's a good meeting?
Wasn't it good? Wasn't it? It was fantastic, wasn't it? It was